Middle East and around the world. The truth is that in cyberspace, no one country can go it alone. In Britain, we are significantly increasing our national cyber defences and have created a new 4-year programme with over £650 million of additional government funding. We're working to ensure that as many small businesses as possible win contracts to help build our cybersecurity infrastructure, supporting the next generation of cyber assurance technology, as well as innovation and growth in our economy. We want to make the United Kingdom a preeminent safe space for e-commerce and intellectual property online. But many countries don't yet have the resources or capability to invest to the same degree. The international dimensions of the misuse of digital networks also requires new forms of cooperation and collaboration. More of the vital infrastructure of the internet is moving east, and its future users will be different too. 90% of Africa could join the internet in the coming years, for example. There's currently no forum of the kind this conference represents, in which nations, business and civil society can engage as equal partners to discuss issues in cyberspace. And we believe that needs to change. In place of today's cyber free-for-all, we need understood rules of the road. Britain has proposed a set of 7 principles as a basis for more effective cooperation between states, business and organisation. These are the need for governments to act proportionately in cyberspace and in accordance with international law, the need for everyone to have the ability to access cyberspace, including the skills, technology, confidence and opportunity to do so, the need for users of cyberspace to show tolerance and respect for diversity of language, culture and ideas, ensuring that cyberspace remains open to innovation and the free flow of ideas, information and expression, the need to respect individual rights of privacy and to provide proper protection to intellectual property, the need for us all to work collectively to tackle the threat from criminals acting online, and the promotion of a competitive environment which ensures a fair return on investment in networks, services and content. We suggested these principles as a starting point in efforts to reach a broad agreement about behaviour in cyberspace. We want to widen the pool of nations and cyber users that agree with us about the need for norms of behaviour and that want to seek a future cyberspace based on opportunity, freedom, innovation, human rights and partnership between government, civil society and the private sector. Building this consensus is a great challenge for our time. It must be pursued with the same intensity as efforts to eradicate global poverty or tackle climate change. For just as our climate is ever-present and all-pervasive, our way of living dependent on our environment, and our prosperity inseparable from that of the global economy, so we're all linked by the innumerable connections of the networked world. We all need the internet to be a driver of growth and innovation in our economies, bringing down costs and supporting employment. All of us want to benefit from the efficiency, safety and reliability that comes from integrated systems online to deliver public services and manage national infrastructure. Whatever country we're from, we have an interest in ensuring that children are not vulnerable online, that terrorists have no safe havens on the web, and that the integrity of our financial systems is maintained. And many of us want to use the digital sphere to enable us to be more transparent, responsive and accountable to our citizens, and to support free trade and democratic development worldwide. It's in all our interests to ensure a future in which everyone can have safe and reliable access to cyberspace without fear they'll be targeted by criminals. A future in which the rights, protections and laws that protect us offline do so online, and that those who abuse the internet for crime, terrorism or malicious attack find it harder to do so. That's the positive vision, one in which we're able to use new technologies to the full, to spur economic growth in developing countries, to narrow the digital divide, to give our citizens greater choice, to find new ways of addressing conflicts, to protect cultural diversity and the free flow of ideas, to root out and prevent grotesque human rights abuses, and to make successful prosecutions against cyber criminals the norm rather than the exception that it is today. But unless we begin to take action to ensure that positive future, a darker scenario could well prevail. For the private sector, rising costs to business from cybercrime, barriers to trade and commerce, companies being held to ransom by hacktivists, and the theft of intellectual property, sapping prosperity and innovation, and driving investment away from countries whose systems are seen to be insecure. For individuals, a heightened risk of exposure to crime, as efforts to clamp down on crimes such as child pornography in one part of the world are rendered ineffective by illegal practices on networks in other countries, disruptions in service due to state intrusion or crude censorship in some parts of the world, the general uncertainty, fear and loss of confidence in a compromised cyberspace. And for governments, threats to critical infrastructure, the loss of tax revenue or the defrauding of government services, the theft of confidential national information and vulnerability to attacks in cyberspace. If these scenarios come to pass, they will undermine the wider benefits of our networked world. So it's time to build on our common interests, developing firm ideas and proposals with real political and diplomatic weight that help us attain the full economic and social potential of cyberspace, while guarding against an unpredictable and potentially dangerous future. I welcome the leadership shown by Hungary, which will offer to host a follow-on conference on norms of behavior in cyberspace in 2012, and by the Republic of Korea, which will also host a conference in 2013. Both conferences will build on what we discuss here in London. We will not succeed in agreeing a way forward overnight, but it is work that must begin now, and I'm grateful to you all, before we listen to our other speakers, from coming along today to take part in this vital work. Thank you very much indeed. I'll introduce you. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Now I'm going to introduce our 7 speakers of this session, each of whom are going to speak for up to 10 minutes. I know that everyone has been looking forward to Secretary Hillary Clinton coming here this afternoon. Sadly, she's not able to travel from the United States for family reasons today, so she won't be with us, but we are expecting Vice President Biden in her place to address us through the screen, appropriately enough, for a cyberspace conference. He will deliver her speech for her. And there will be further speeches after that from ministers from the Republic of Korea and from Russia. So I welcome their participation as well. And I'd now like to introduce as the first guest speaker in this session, Helen Clark, Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme. She is going to talk about values of cyber for the development agenda. She is the first woman to lead the United Nations Development Programme, also chair of the UN Development Group, and of course was Prime Minister of New Zealand for 9 years, from 1999 to 2008. So please join me in welcoming Helen Clark. Thank you very much.
Foreign Secretary, ministers, distinguished participants, and thank you, Foreign Secretary, for inviting me to take part in the conference today and give a development perspective. This session is entitled Hopes and Fears, and I'm going to focus on the hopes. I often say in the development business, we are in the hope business. But let me acknowledge just briefly at the outset that there are legitimate fears, as the Foreign Secretary has outlined, about the downside of our growing dependence on cyberspace and the opportunity it offers for crime of various kinds. And I think the discussion and international cooperation around that is extremely important. The core of my case today is around the enabling platforms which ICTs create to develop economies, societies, communities and individual potential in both the global north and global south. ICTs as such platforms are highly relevant to achieving the Millennium Development Goals promulgated in 2000 and with a range of targets to be met in 2015. Millennium Development Goal 8 includes a target to make the benefits of new technologies, especially ICTs, readily available to people around the globe in cooperation with the private sector. So this conference, which brings together governments, industry, civil society, NGOs, activists, is highly relevant to meeting Millennium Development Goal 8. I want to make three main points about the transformative role which ICTs are playing in development. First, the catalytic role in advancing human development by improving access to information and service delivery and enabling broader democratic participation. Secondly, the way in which ICTs can transform government and development actor interaction, ensuring that our policies and programs are more responsive to the needs and priorities of the poorest and marginalised people. And thirdly, I want to comment on the growing demand for ICT solutions and applications, coupled with the great ICT innovation in the Global South, and how that can create new jobs, enhance public-private partnerships, and expand South-South cooperation. Elaborating on the first, ICT is a catalyst for human development. We see so many examples across so many sectors, whether it's linking remote health clinics with specialist diagnostic centres and helping bring down those problems with infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates. We see it in linking students in rural areas with teachers and the wealth of knowledge available in cyberspace. We're seeing it in the way in which people are interfacing with public institutions and services. There are so many success stories and so many public-private partnerships in these areas. UNDP focuses particularly on e-governance and the strategic use and deployment of ICTs to improve the efficiency and the transparency of public institutions and service delivery, and have been involved in initiatives around these areas in more than 80 countries. For example, Bangladesh, where we helped shape the policy framework for Digital Bangladesh, a national agenda which uses ICTs to implement and help meet goals in education, health, employment, and poverty reduction, with more than 4,000 e-service centres deployed around the country, bringing public and private services closer to local communities. One of many economic development examples in Ethiopia, where we supported the setting up of the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, which empowers small farmers by improving the flow of information through computerised price tracking and enables electronic interactions between buyers and sellers. This information flows back to the farmers through the now ubiquitous cell phone. Then I want to comment on the second area of giving voice to the poor and transforming the way in which development actors respond. At UNDP, we work on expanding e-participation to foster civic engagement and dialogue between governments and stakeholders. The two-way communication between citizens and government officials enabled through ICTs, and especially through mobile technologies and social networks, is so critical for democratic processes and ensuring that people can have equal voice. Of course, where governments are not responsive, these channels also take on a life of their own, as in the Arab States region this year, where we saw the demands of people increasingly communicated through social media channels, whether they be Facebook, Twitter, blogs, text messaging, rather than being controlled through or blocked by traditional media and politicians. I'm told of one demonstrator in the region who said, "We use Facebook to mobilise, Twitter to live report, and YouTube to broadcast our stories." I thought that was remarkable segmentation of the use of these platforms. These voices from the grassroots have transformative power, and if we acknowledge and affirm the value and contribution of those voices, we will all respond much more effectively to the needs and priorities of people struggling to get ahead and build better futures. Let me say a special word on the role of ICTs in building resilience to disaster and in preventing crises. As ICTs allow us to have real-time information directly from people on the front lines of crises. That can help target responses, especially in fast-changing situations like those related to political transitions, public health emergencies, or national disasters. The UN's Global Pulse Initiative, which has a next phase about to be launched, is an example of such an initiative, and it will provide real-time information on how adverse events like fast rising food prices or slowing economic growth or major job losses are impacting on people and their communities. Other examples: data collection via mobile phone is now being widely